Welcome to our journey through history's most powerful political movements. These aren't just stories from dusty textbooks, they're the events that shaped our world. Did you know the Athenian democracy gave common people a voice over 2,500 years ago? Or that the Berlin Wall's fall was triggered by a simple press conference error? Political movements have always been the engines of change. The French Revolution wasn't just about storming the Bastille, it sparked ideas that influenced revolutions everywhere. The American Revolution introduced the idea that government should serve the people, not the other way around. In South Africa, the end of apartheid was a victory of strategic activism and international pressure. And the Russian Revolution showed how a small group could change the course of a massive empire. These movements used clever strategies and bold actions, from guerrilla tactics to powerful propaganda. In the coming chapters, we'll dive into these movements, exploring the bold strategies and the incredible people behind them. You'll discover how ordinary citizens, visionary leaders, and a bit of luck changed the course of history. So, buckle up for a fascinating ride through the 6 political movements that changed the world forever. Chapter 1: Dawn of Democracy, the Athenian Revolution. Did you know that the idea of democracy, which we often take for granted, started over 2,500 years ago in a small city in Greece? Yes, Athens is the birthplace of democracy, a radical concept at the time that proposed power should lie in the hands of the demos, or the people. The Athenian democracy wasn't perfect by today's standards, it excluded women, slaves, and foreigners, but it was a groundbreaking start. The idea began around 508 BC, when Cleisthenes, often called the father of Athenian democracy, introduced reforms that broke the power of aristocratic families and divided the city into 10 new tribes based on residence rather than bloodline. Each tribe had its representatives, randomly selected, to serve in the new council called the Boule. This was to ensure that no single area or group would dominate politics. One of the most fascinating aspects of Athenian democracy was the use of a device called the cleriterion. This was an ancient form of random selection that used black and white stones to pick council members. Imagine that, leaders chosen by random lottery rather than by wealth or birth. Voting was done with a show of hands in the assembly, which met 40 times a year. Any male citizen could speak, propose a law, or challenge one. This level of direct participation was unheard of at the time and laid the groundwork for modern democratic systems. Historians often marvel at how the Athenians committed to this idea. During its peak, the assembly could draw over 6,000 participants. That's a massive turnout in a city of about 30,000 male citizens. This goes to show how engaged the Athenians were in the governance of their city. Yet, the system had its critics. Plato famously detested it, believing democracy would lead to rule by the ignorant. He argued that just as one would not choose a ship captain by lot, one should not select leaders this way either. Despite such criticism, the experiment in democracy was a key turning point in political history, influencing countless generations thereafter. Chapter 2: The Spirit of Liberty, the American Revolution. Moving forward in time, the American Revolution presents another monumental chapter in the history of political movements. This revolution was not just a fight for independence from British rule, it was a battle for the idea of a government that derives its power from the consent of the governed. The strategies employed during the American Revolution were as diverse as the people involved. From the intellectual debates in colonial newspapers to the bloody battlefields, every action was part of a larger strategy to forge a new nation. The use of pamphlets like Thomas Paine's Common Sense was crucial. This pamphlet, selling over 500,000 copies, argued boldly for independence and helped shift public opinion towards the revolutionary cause. Did you know that the Continental Army, under the leadership of George Washington, used more than just conventional warfare tactics? They relied heavily on espionage and intelligence gathering. For instance, the Culper Spy Ring, a group of spies based in New York and Connecticut, played a pivotal role in providing information about British troop movements and plans. Moreover, the revolutionaries were adept at forging alliances. The Treaty of Alliance with France in 1778 was a game-changer, bringing French military and financial aid that proved critical to the success of the revolution. It's interesting to note that without the French Navy, the decisive victory at Yorktown in 1781 might not have been possible. Throughout the war, the American leaders also mastered the art of propaganda, utilizing it to boost morale and gain international support. Benjamin Franklin, in particular, was instrumental in this regard. While serving as the ambassador to France, he charmed and convinced the French to support the American cause, showcasing the power of diplomacy. The American Revolution, thus, was not just a military battle but a complex campaign of intellect, strategy, and resilience. It changed not only the fate of a continent but also the ideas of governance worldwide. Chapter 3: Shadows over the Bastille, the French Revolution. The French Revolution was more than just a chaotic period, it was a seismic shift that reshaped France and influenced revolutions around the world. The storming of the Bastille on July 14, 1789, wasn't just an act of aggression against a prison, it symbolized the downfall of oppressive authority and the rise of the people's power. Strategically, the leaders of the revolution were adept at using symbolic acts like this to galvanize public support. They also excelled in the art of pamphleteering, using the printed word to spread revolutionary ideas and incite action among the masses. One of the most influential pamphlets was What is the Third Estate? By Abbé Sieyès, which effectively argued that the common people were the true strength of the nation, not the nobles or the clergy. As the revolution progressed, the revolutionaries introduced the levy en masse, a revolutionary war draft in 1793, which mobilized all citizens towards the cause. This was the first example of total national conscription, setting a precedent that would later be followed by many nations in times of war. Another strategic aspect of the revolution was the use of committees like the Committee of Public Safety, which coordinated the government's actions. Although it later became notorious for its role in the Reign of Terror, initially, it was crucial in centralizing control and responding swiftly to threats, both internal and external. The revolution was also marked by its radical legal reforms. It completely overhauled the French legal system, introducing the Napoleonic Code, which influenced legal systems around the world. This shift from customary law to written law codified rights and procedures, a legacy that persists in the civil law tradition today. Chapter 4, Red Banners Rising, the Russian Revolution. The Russian Revolution of 1917 was a pivotal event that led to the rise of the Soviet Union and had a profound impact on 20th-century global politics. The February Revolution, which initially overthrew the Tsar, was largely spontaneous, but the October Revolution was a masterclass in strategy, orchestrated by the Bolsheviks under Lenin's leadership. Lenin's ability to turn theoretical Marxism into a concrete plan for action was critical. He provided clear, understandable ideas that resonated with the masses, like peace, land, and bread. These promises addressed the immediate needs of the Russian people, ending the war, redistributing land, and ensuring food security. One strategic masterpiece was the distribution of the Bolshevik newspaper, Pravda, which played a crucial role in disseminating Lenin's ideas and rallying support. The use of AGIT trains that traveled across Russia spreading propaganda and educating people about Bolshevik policies, was another innovative tactic that proved effective in such a vast country. The Bolsheviks also excelled in leveraging alliances. They formed the Red Guard, units of workers and peasants trained and armed to protect the revolution. This grassroots military force was essential in overthrowing the provisional government and establishing Bolshevik control. Perhaps the most critical strategy was the Bolsheviks' decision to negotiate peace with Germany at Brest-Litovsk. While controversial and costly in terms of territory, this move allowed the Bolsheviks to consolidate power internally without the distraction of World War I, ensuring their survival and enabling them to implement their revolutionary agenda. Chapter 5, Apartheid's End, the South African Freedom Struggle. The end of apartheid in South Africa is a powerful story of resilience and strategic activism. It was a long, hard fight, marked by extraordinary courage and smart tactics. Nelson Mandela, imprisoned for 27 years, became the symbol of this struggle. His ability to forgive and negotiate was crucial in transitioning South Africa from apartheid to democracy. The African National Congress, ANC, played a central role in this movement. They used a mix of peaceful protests, civil disobedience, and armed resistance to challenge the apartheid regime. The 1952 Defiance Campaign, led by the ANC, saw thousands of people openly defy apartheid laws, sparking widespread international attention. One of the most effective strategies was the use of international pressure. The ANC and anti-apartheid activists worked tirelessly to isolate South Africa economically and culturally. Boycotts, sanctions, and divestment campaigns put significant pressure on the apartheid regime. By the 1980s, over 25 countries had imposed economic sanctions on South Africa, severely affecting its economy. Another key strategy was the mobilization of grassroots organizations within South Africa. Groups like the United Democratic Front, UDF, united a diverse array of organizations, from churches to student groups, creating a broad-based coalition that amplified their impact. These internal pressures made it increasingly difficult for the government to maintain control. The role of media cannot be overstated. Despite severe censorship, brave journalists and international media outlets exposed the brutal realities of apartheid to the world. The 1976 Soweto uprising, where police shot and killed protesting schoolchildren, was a turning point. Images of the violence were broadcast globally, sparking outrage and solidarity. Mandela's release in 1990 was a strategic move by President F.W. de Klerk, who realized that apartheid was unsustainable. Mandela's subsequent negotiations with de Klerk led to the dismantling of apartheid laws and the first multiracial elections in 1994. This peaceful transition was a testament to strategic leadership and the power of forgiveness and reconciliation. Chapter 6, Walls Come Tumbling Down, the Fall of the Berlin Wall. The fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 was a defining moment in world history, symbolizing the end of the Cold War and the beginning of a new era in Europe. The strategies leading up to this moment were a blend of political maneuvering, popular protest, and international diplomacy. The East German government's decision to open the wall was influenced by a series of strategic errors and growing public unrest. For years, East Germans had been fleeing to the west through Hungary and Czechoslovakia, putting enormous pressure on the regime. The Hungarian government's decision to open its borders with Austria in May 1989 acted as a catalyst, accelerating the exodus. Mass protests in East Germany, particularly in Leipzig, played a critical role. The Monday demonstrations, which began in September 1989, grew rapidly in size and intensity. By November, hundreds of thousands of people were demanding freedom of movement and democratic reforms. The sheer scale of these protests made it clear that the status quo was untenable. Media again played a vital role. West German television broadcasts were accessible in the East, providing East Germans with uncensored information and a glimpse of life in the West. This constant flow of information helped to undermine the East German government's control. A significant strategic blunder occurred on November 9, 1989, when a press conference by an East German official mistakenly announced that the border was open immediately. In reality, the new regulations were meant to be implemented gradually. However, thousands of East Germans flocked to the wall, and the overwhelmed border guards eventually opened the gates. The fall of the Berlin Wall was also the result of years of diplomatic efforts and changing geopolitical dynamics. The policies of Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev, particularly his reforms of glasnost, openness, and perestroika, restructuring, reduced Soviet intervention in Eastern Europe and encouraged reforms. The Berlin Wall's collapse not only reunited a city but also paved the way for German reunification and the end of communist regimes across Eastern Europe. It was a powerful example of how strategic errors, popular movements, and international diplomacy can converge to change the course of history.